Due to the rapid development of science and technology, international and scientific and cultural communications, the lexical composition on scientific and professional speech is quickly being developed. The result of this process is the existence of certain difficulties in translating and forming new terms. There is an urgent need to study ways to create and form new verbal terms. The relevance of our work is to determine the features of creating and translating verbal terms, as well as to create pedagogical tasks to determine the quality of assimilation, the studied material. The scientific novelty is based on systematization of scientific material on topic methods of developing Ukrainian verbal terms with procedural meaning and development unique pedagogical testing tasks. The object of our research are Ukrainian language terms nouns with a procedural meaning with their peculiarities of creation. The subject of research are pedagogical testing tasks that provide an opportunity to adequately and objectively assess students' knowledge. The research aims of our work is to study the problem of creating verbal terms and create thematic tasks from systematized scientific research. Next slide. To study theoretical material on development of Ukrainian terminology, to study and systematize accurate knowledge on topic of defining Ukrainian terminological system, terminology and term, to define the peculiarities of terminology and terms, to define and make a research in the topic of general features and methods of creating Ukrainian terms, to define and make a research in the topic of general features and methods of creating Ukrainian terms with procedural meaning, to systematize received knowledges about the methods of creating Ukrainian terms with procedural meaning, to study the recommendations for creating of testing tasks. To create testing tasks, our focus on determination, the quality of assimilation of the studied material. On our work, such methods of scientific research as method of analysis, generalization, and sampling method have been used. The theoretical significance of our research is based on meta-analysis and systematization of scientific material, and terminological accumulation plays a significant role in an ability of adoption new knowledges and their objective assess. The practical significance of our created tasks for educational process with students and their ability of adoption new knowledges and their objective assess. There exist some complications on creation and translation terms of procedural meaning because of different interpretation of context within scientists. The terms of procedural meaning play an important role in expanding of terminology and the language of science. Verb grammatical category of aspects should be preserved in newly formed terms nouns by using suffixes, prefixes, and non-suffixes method of verb formation. You can express perspective and imperspective aspect of verb using non-suffix and suffix method. The use of suffixes enya can emphasize the perfection of the action. In turn, the use of suffixes anya can emphasize the imperfection of the action. So we can see the examples of use suffixes nya for creating verbal noun terms with procedural meaning. In some cases, we can see an ambiguous meaning of verbal terms with suffixes "enya". In the first case, a verbal term noun means the perfection of action and the consequence of that action. In the second case, verbal term emphasizes the imperfection of action and phenomenon of that action. So in the next slide, we can see the examples. There are given two analogues of terms with perfect and imperfect meaning after translation, and in our research, we've admitted the tendency of preferable use of terms with the imperfection meaning in Russian language, so that we preferably use imperfection meaning so that we preferably use imperfect variants of the transit terms. However, the use of such terms occurs regardless of their type. If it's necessary to emphasize the duration of that action, we use either the form of the imperfect form or auxiliary verbs that make the context clear and more understandable. We can see the examples of translated Russian terms. In our research, we've examined types of testing tasks as matching, multiple choice, open question, so have decided that the use of open questions and multiple choice was accurate. Due to the absence of pedagogical material on the topic, there was inability to create matching tasks. In conclusion, next slide. There are examples of testing tasks. And so in conclusion, we've created 60 testing tasks that have been standardized. The percentage of that tasks with one correct answer is 50, but with open answer is also 50. These testing tasks are aimed at testing knowledge from selected and structured material on the topics, ways to create Ukrainian language terms with a procedural meaning intended for study among educational applicants. Thank you for your attention.